baby.
We in here, yeah, we in here, 'cause we been.
Y'all better get comfortable with saying black.
We in here, yeah, we in here, 'cause
Black versus the Board of Education.
Cause we came here, rid of us now. We in here, yeah, we in here. Cause we came here, rid of us now. And you know, and we don't ever go. So you do what you want.
That's why we are indeed a whole mood.
That's it.
And the whole mood is exactly what we'll continue to be. Welcome to another episode of Black versus the Board of Education. My name is Miss Laureen, and we welcome you into this space. And oh, we have a good one for you today. Today, we're talking about visual resistance and artists' view of Black history. And we have a special guest who will be joining us. And we have to snap it up for Miss Anaya, who made the connection. Hey, hey, hey. But before we get to our special guest, we will go around the room just to introduce ourselves very quickly. And I'm going to start with this gentleman next to me before I got to punch him. Go.
How you doing? I'm the gentleman that may get punched later. My name is Mr. Fox. How's everybody doing? As they say, happy Monday. Continue to go on y'all grind all the way through Friday.
Happy Monday indeed. Miss Lady, hey, hey, hey.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anaya. I'm a rising junior attending Howard University, and I'm super excited to be on this episode.
Wonderful. And rounding us off today, hey, sir.
This is me, and this time I have my mouth in the microphone.
You better go. You showing out.
How you doing, brother? My name is Mr. Daniel Chastain. Happy to be here and looking forward to this interview.
Now, a lot of times when we're talking about resistance or what, no, he does not have his phone ringing right while I'm trying to monologue
The
in a
alarm,
minute.
too.
I'm just saying. A lot of times when we talk about resistance and we talk about protests or rising up against the system, we rarely get to talk to artists who have taken that and kind of shaped their own kind of path. So would you mind introducing yourself, sir? And we will get into our discussion.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to say, it's an honor to be here with you guys this afternoon. And man, your opening sequence for the podcast is all that. I mean, like that. That's that's one of the dopest openings since Do the Right Thing.
Ooh, shout out to Mr. Delaire Doyle, who actually put that sequence together for us. So shout out to him.
So my name is Milton Bowens, but my artistic signature / name trademark is actually Milton 510. And a lot of people think I sign all of my artwork Milton 510 is because originally I'm born and raised from Oakland, California, and Oakland's area code is 510. But actually, I'm the fifth boy in a family of 10 children. There was 5 boys and 5 girls. I'm the fifth boy and the 10th child. So I write Milton 510 on all of my work just as a reminder, as being a Black male coming out of East Oakland. Becoming a fine artist is not like a career path that you would think that's possible. And I was able to achieve that, through the strength of my family and their support. And it's just a subtle reminder to me to stay grounded and humbled and always recognize my roots. And the reason I'm doing this work is because of my support network, which was my family.
And as you're talking, I'm just all in your business behind you, and I'm assuming that's why it's there. But I always notice the words that you put on your pictures. Those are part of your trademark, kind of. You have a main kind of character, and then you have these words. So, what made you start using words in your paintings?
Well, full disclosure, I was a troubled kid. I lost my father right when I was getting ready. I had just turned 10 years old, and my father passed. So, I was born in the late 60s. And, growing up in the 70s, there wasn't no discussions around mental health or anything of that nature, like in the Black community, especially not in Oakland. Like the Oakland that I grew up in was a very, unforgiving city. It was the decline of the Panther Party. It was the creation of pimp culture. Drugs had made its way into the community. So I really didn't know how to cope. with that loss, and so I started, like doing graffiti, and I got arrested for tagging an Oakland police car, and there was a mediator at my juvenile little hearing, and he happened to work at the East Oakland Youth Development Center. His name was Robert Collier, but he actually was a teacher at the Renaissance School for Arts in North Oakland. It's located on Broadway Terrace. Like the school still exists, but now they call it Far West Art School. It was right across the street from the old California College of Arts and Crafts campus. So he actually talked to the mediator on my mother's behalf and got me enrolled in the art school. So full disclosure, I mean, I went to art school from the 7th grade through the 12th grade. Like I was formally trained through junior high and high school, in the arts. Um, but this whole time going to Oakland Public School and it being an arts magnet school, we would do all of these field trips around the city to go to like the Oakland Museum, the Palace of Legion of Honor, the DeYoung, SF MoMA, and I would never see the Oakland that I grew up in, and I would never really see no black art. And so I got a full ride scholarship to go to the academy in San Francisco and to go to CCAC. And I chose to go to CCAC just because it was familiar for me. And my freshman year was probably the worst year in my artistic career. Like them teachers literally told me, like, there's nothing you're gonna learn here that you haven't learned at high school. Just erase the dates on your projects and turn them in.
Huh?
Word, straight up. I don't want to call none of them out by name, but they know who they are. Because they're still around and they're still active in the arts community. But that's basically what they told me. So I dropped out of college in my freshman year and joined the military. Because I come from a military family. All four of my brothers served in the military. 3 of them retired as career servicemen. My father served in the Korean conflict. My grandfather was in World War II. So I came from a military background family. So that was kind of always the default for the males in our family. Like all my sisters and stuff went to college, but the guys in our family all did the military thing. I was the first male in my family to go to college, and then I dropped out as a freshman. So when I got home from the military, long story short, I met a mentor at Laney College, and I only went to Laney College just to use my GI Bill. And I ended up meeting my mentor who would change my life. And he's really the reason that I'm an artist today. His name is David Bradford. I affectionately refer to him as Yoda. He tricked me into this conversation about art history. And, because I had lost my father at a young age, anytime I meet an older statesman, a black male, it's a uniquely special experience for me. I find it funny that society doesn't pay attention to the fact that, or they don't find anything wrong with the fact that there ain't a whole bunch of old black men around in communities.
Mm.
Right.
And nobody really pays attention to that. But that's an intentional strategy of removing that elder statesman and that wisdom from our communities. And it's done in a variety of ways. I mean, we lost it generationally. We lose it through the wars, our patriotism and serving time in America's military. We lose generation of black men to war. We use generation of black men to incarceration. We use generation of older black men through, drugs and violence. So you don't see in certain situations, in certain areas and communities, you don't see a whole bunch of old black men. I'm talking about gray hair, white hair, black men, distinguished, walking around, dropping nuggets on you. So every time I run across an older statesman, an old black man, I really relish that time that I get a chance to spend with them. And Mr. Bradford just just opened up a way of thinking that I had never thought in terms of being an artist before. He tricked me into this conversation about art history, and we talked for about 90 minutes, and I'm trying to impress him, and so I'm running off, art history as it was taught to me, not realizing that it was all white European art history. And he let me get everything out, and then he said, "Young blood, don't you know black people make art too?"
Wow.
And it hit me like a ton of bricks. So he started asking me questions about the Harlem Renaissance, and I didn't have no answers for him. because I had never been taught that history. So when he sent me, he said, man, we could talk about the Warriors. We could talk about the 49ers, the A's, the Giants, the Raiders. We can even talk about the San Jose Sharks. But we can't talk about art until you could talk to me about black artists the way you talk about them white artists.
Oh,
So he sent me on a pilgrimage, man, and I went on it. And one of my discoveries was the artists of the Harlem Renaissance era, and I fell in love with James Baldwin, Langston Hughes, and Zora Neale Hurston. and that, systematically changed my life, the way I thought, my investigative intellect, and that's when I started incorporating text into my work.
Mr. Fox.
So,
who you got a question now?
I do.
Okay. Go ahead.
Now, I do have a question for you, big brother. I appreciate that intro and that story, but what gives you the inspiration to actually choose the subject, and then how do you depict what text you want to put on that picture?
I think as a visual artist, I'm actually more inspired by the way filmmakers make movies than I am with the way artists make art. There's no magical pixie dust as a painter. We all are using the same materials. Picasso, Van Gogh, Raphael, Michelangelo, Leonardo, Donatello, the Ninja Turtles, we all use the same materials. We use oil paint and canvas, acrylic paint and canvas, pastel, collage, whatever medium is one of the oldest mediums known to mankind when it comes to art. It's nothing fancy or new. The latest, newest innovation in art is digital art and AI. Other than that, if you're a traditional studio artist, you're using the same materials that they call the so-called masters are using. So for me, art is more about the story and information more so than the technique. And like I said, people always I think they kind of underestimate my work at first glance because I use a combination of mixed media. I use collage, but then I use paint, and then I use a bunch of symbolism. But it's calculated. To really understand my work, you got to kind of understand art history. All of my work is really just paying tribute to some artists that I believe I stand on their shoulders. So if you're looking at Langston Hughes, if you're looking at James Baldwin, you're also looking at Jacob Lawrence and Romare Bearden. If you're looking at Zora Neale Hurston, if you're looking at Conte Cullen, W.E.B. Du Bois, you're also looking at Jean-Michel Basquiat. You're also looking at my mentor, David Bradford. So when I pick an image, at first glance, you might see Jim Kelly from, matter of fact, right here, my homeboy, the Black Dragon. You might see Jim Kelly from Enter the Dragon, depending on your age. But I might flip it and have the Wu-Tang symbol, the Wu-Tang Clan logo in the painting with them, and the text might say "Protect your neck." Now, the average person, if they ain't hip to pop culture, and depending on when they was raised, they might not get that reference. But if you've seen Enter the Dragon and you've seen what happened to Jim Kelly in the flick, you're gonna know why I'm telling you to protect your neck. You know what I'm saying? So I believe filmmakers have this wonderful medium, and I consider it one of the most powerful mediums ever to be created, is the visual motion picture, that ability to tell that story. Because the homie Tupac, I was introduced to Tupac by a friend of mine who went to art school with me, Money B. Me and Money B went to art school together.
Underground Money B?
Digital Underground Money B.
Okay.
So we went to school for 2 years together, and then when Oakland public schools in the late 70s started cutting their budgets, our art school budget got cut. So they got rid of the music, dance, and theater, and only kept the visual art. So Money B bounced and went to Berkeley High. But we always maintained our friendship. So after I got home from the military and was at Laney using my GI Bill, all of my homies have blew up in the hood. Everybody, you had Tajay from the Souls of Mischief, Money B, Digital Underground, my homies from Capital Tax, and 415. You had all of these dudes that I grew up with who were in the industry now. And so I started actually doing like commercial art for them. And I actually got, and Money actually introduced me to Pop. And we was at my mother's house one afternoon just having a debate about the merits of a performing arts school versus a visual arts school. And Pac was breaking shit down. Like, excuse me. Pac was
you fine. Keep going. Keep going.
Pac was breaking it down, and it always dawned on me like, dude, how's this fool sitting up here like reciting Shakespeare and talking about plays and and writing structure, and he said something to me that stuck, and I use it as a tribute in my work to him personally. He said, well, Mill, think about it this way. He was like, you're a visual artist, so you could tell a story with a picture. He was like, but I'm communicating with words. He was like, if I say I, people always are going to immediately think it's from my perspective. He said, but when I'm writing a poem, if I write that I, E-Y-E, I'm not telling you it's my perspective. I'm trying to get the viewer who's reading it to see that you need to see this through your eyes. You need to see it through your lens.
That's nice.
So the structure of understanding like the malleability of using words just like stuck with me. And it was like, and I was like, damn, this knucklehead is deep. So yeah, I just missed that we didn't have more time to collab and spend building. That's the only thing about that story.
And the funny thing is, I kept focusing on the Enter the Dragon. Now, I've never seen it. However, I was hoping behind there I would see Bruce Leroy somewhere.
I have done many Bruce Leroy pieces from The Last Dragon. But yeah, but see, like my go-to was Enter the Dragon. You might see I got Bruce Lee over here as Kato from the Green Hornet, and I got Bruce Lee from Enter the Dragon right here. Like, it's just like I think the kung fu flicks of the 70s are so integral to hip hop and urban culture. Like when you think about blaxploitation in movies like Shaft, Coffee, Three the Hard Way, like you can't really separate them from like the Five Deadly Venoms or the Kid with the Golden Arms. It's like it was a different 70s, but that kung fu genre just kind of like resonated, especially in Oakland. Like that kung fu genre of films just like resonated with young cats in Oakland, man. Like every Saturday, man, I was at the movies, man, I'd spend a whole day at East Mall movie theater or at the Lux or Roxy downtown Oakland, probably seeing movies I wasn't supposed to see, but
I just noticed all the kings, they all got crowns on their heads.
Yeah,
in
man.
The background, tell me about that. Yeah,
so a lot of people think Basquiat is the originator of the crown because he brought it into fine art and this very affluent, rich, fine art world in terms of him popularizing the crown. But the crown actually comes out of graffiti culture in the late 70s. So when you think about the late 70s, I'm talking about Wild Style. If you go back and look at that documentary Wild Style, and you see some of the original, graph writers, like Phase One is the one who inspired me the most. He's legendary in New York, and he called Phase One, but he could break graffiti down in phases. Like he could show you how to get from Phase One all the way to like Phase 5, and take a tag to a complete burner. So in New York, if you were able to get your graph name up in more than one borough, you were considered royalty. Or if you could get your graph up on a certain line, like if you could get your graph on a train that ran a certain route, like if you could get it from the Bronx to Coney Island, where it passed through several boroughs, you were considered royalty. So you were able to put a crown over your graffiti tag. So that's where that comes from. And Jean-Michel if people don't realize, like when Jean-Michel first got started, he got started under the name of Samo. Same old shit, different day. That was the abbreviation, was Samo. But it was him and it was his Puerto Rican buddy Al Diaz, who were doing it together. And Al Diaz was a real graffiti artist. Basquiat was more into like the traditional art and wanting to be, included in the New York art world, which ultimately paid off for him. But it started as this duo that ended up just people being known for this graffiti tag, which was Samo. So the crown, it comes from that graffiti culture of if you can get your work up in certain areas where people don't expect it, you can actually put the crown over your character. And the average people probably don't know, like, you've seen my work before and you probably just didn't realize I was the person who did it. Like, another funny story, like during the pandemic, when Charles Barkley was doing the NBA from his house for ESPN and for TNT, because everything was shut down. When he was in his house doing his ESPN during the pandemic, the painting that was behind him was my painting.
Mm.
And so, in that same graffiti tradition, like, you'll see my painting and it's like, I got my painting in all of these strategic places that you probably don't know is me, but that allows me to put that crown over my icons.
Mm.
So because I primarily focus on the African American experience, I'm uplifting my folks, man. I'm rooting for everybody Black, and I
like that.
And I feel that the Black experience is royalty. So it's only right that we crown them.
For surely.
I love that.
I like
if you're just joining us, we are talking to our special guest, Milton 510 Bowens, and we're talking about the visual resistance in artist's view of Black history. Mr. Fox, did you have a question you wanted to throw into the conversation?
I was gonna say I'm listening to him, and you have a lot of enriched culture about where things come from, and you talking about the trains of how they run through the boroughs and where artwork came from, and you've named some pretty famous artists, which leads me to believe that you take your work more personal than other people. It has a more you've put your signature touch on it. That being said, it makes me wonder: do you have a piece that's real personal to you? Something that you've done that's like, because you speak on pieces like that was the painting that was behind his head while this was happening, and I put crowns on it for that. What, you got something that you really attached to, something that's really personal that you've done out there that it really holds your heart?
Yeah, honestly, I do. And a few years ago, I probably would have answered this question totally differently. But when the Golden State Warriors decided to move from the Oakland Coliseum to San Francisco to Chase Arena, I'm a lifelong Golden State Warriors fan. Like, I was Golden State Warriors fan back when they had Bernard King, Sleepy Floyd, and World Be Free. Like. That was my team. So I done been through the whole Run TMC. I done been through the We Believe era. I was, man, I was a Warriors fan where you can buy a ticket for $10 and then go sit courtside to see them play. Like, cause wasn't nobody up in there. So, I'm represented by a gallery that has connections to an agency called Sports and the Arts. And when the Warriors decided to move from Oracle Arena to Chase Center, I got a call, and my gallery representation asked me would I be interested in doing some artwork for the Golden State Warriors. And at first I thought they was pulling my leg. Like, I'm like, come on, man, like, for real, like, the Warriors, like, they want some of my work. And they was like, well, yeah, they've seen your work around the Bay Area, and they love the way that you tell history in your work. So they commissioned me to do 2 paintings for Chase Arena. And so I took a different angle than the other artists that were participating in the project. And I decided to do a piece that explained why the Warriors are called the Golden State Warriors. Like, the Golden State Warriors is the only California team that has pretty much played up and down the entire state. Like, the Warriors then played in San Diego. The Warriors then played in San Jose. They took a stint in Santa Cruz. They played at the Cow Palace. They played in Oakland. And basically, they moved back home to San Francisco. People forget that the Warriors once called San Francisco their home. They were the San Francisco Warriors. A lot of people didn't like the way them adopting the city. So when they left San Francisco, the Cow Palace, and came to, the Oakland Coliseum, they switched their name back to the Golden State Warriors. So I did this painting of the BART train and the cable car, and I wrote this little poem that basically says that, It's not where you from, it's actually where you at. And as long as, you have one memory of your team that is dear to you, then you are a fan. And it ain't nothing wrong with chasing your dreams.
Mm.
So the painting is called Chasing Your Dreams. And it's on like the third tier, Chase Arena. When you come up the escalators, it's boom, it's right there, so all the fans can see it when they walk in. And the funny thing is, only people who know me as Milton 510 realize it's my painting.
Miss Anaya.
So you mentioned when you first met your mentor, them kind of, I guess, making you realize that you don't know too much about any Black artists. So building off of that, I want to know, why do you think it's important for people in general and our young people to not only know Black artists, but why do you think it's important to tell Black history through art?
Good question.
Well, I think it's important. And first, I want to say that's a very good question. When I met Mr. Bradford, like I said, it's just this, and I know it's connected to me losing my pops, but I listen. You can learn so much just from listening, like, and I didn't realize in that moment that I wasn't listening. I was doing all of the talking because I was so excited to be in this man's presence. He's the head of the art department at Laney. He's paying me some attention. He's giving me some time. And then he was asking me my opinion about stuff, and I'm trying to impress him. And I was doing all of the talking and wasn't listening. So, when he stunned me with that question about not knowing anything, and it wasn't that I didn't know much. I didn't know nothing. Like, that was never taught to me. Never did no book reports on, I was at an art school. Everything was pretty much European focused. And that's the funny thing, because like, nobody seems that it's suspicious that the dominant culture is our curriculum, and cultural importance is an elective that sometimes they don't even allow you to choose.
Yeah.
So when we had that conversation, it was like, man, it's not just that history is important. History is everything.
Mm.
We think of history as if it's in the past, but history is the past, present, and the future. And I'll connect the dots for you real quick. Why young people should understand history is important is I was born in 1967. I was born a couple of years after the passing of the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. Notice I didn't say amendments to nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I said acts, which means they ain't permanent. That somebody else can make a decision on our liberties and our freedoms. But I was born a couple of years after these two big pieces of legislation that at the time people said was the greatest legislation since President Lincoln had signed the Emancipation Proclamation. So when you think about that, my generation is the first generation to grow up in America with the so-called full legal rights of an American.
Mm.
Anybody prior to 1964 can't say that, because the 14th Amendment did not protect African Americans. It gave them equal protection under the law, but if that was true, there never would have been the Black Codes or Jim Crow.
Talk to him.
If you think about integration, out of all the black and white photos you've seen from the civil rights era and integration, you ain't never seen no black and white photo of a bus full of white kids being bused to a black school.
Never.
You ain't never seen a bus full of white folks being bused to a black church. So if we talk about integration, how come the civil rights preachers didn't say, we welcome all these white folks into our congregation? Malcolm X said it, and James Baldwin backed it up. The most segregated time in America's history through the 60s and the 70s was on Sunday afternoon at Baptist, white Baptist churches and black Baptist churches. See, history is going to tell you what the struggle was. Once you know what the struggle was, you have a decision that you need to make. What are you going to do about that struggle? And once you make your decision on what you're going to do about that struggle, that informs what is going to happen moving forward in the future. Because if we think about everybody who said back in the day, man, I wish I would have been living back then when they was putting water hoses and dogs on people. Well,
Yeah.
now's your opportunity to show me what you was gonna do.
Facts. If you're just joining us, we are Black versus the Board of Education. We are talking with Milton 510 Bowens, the visual resistance and artist view of Black history. And you know, I don't. What you had something you want to add?
After you done.
No, because it's gonna take me a while. Go ahead.
I want him to explain, because I'm listening to you talk, and you talking about your mentor a lot. And one thing we do down here, we do a lot of mentorship and a lot of advocacy work with our youth. And the way you speak of your mentor is of a level of respect, a level of love. I could tell you got something from that man. I could tell if I said something ill about that man right now, you'd probably be like, hold up. You know what I mean? That man is giving you something, and you feel dear for him. My question for you would be this: what has mentorship for you meant for you? Because as I know, one thing, I'm not an artist myself with a paintbrush. I'm an artist with my mouth and how I address people. But I know that when we're perfecting the craft, sometimes it takes, as you said, when doing all the talking, they need to listen. Somebody got to come over and say, stroke the brush this way, stroke it that way, add this to your medium for your thing. What has mentorship meant, not just for your artwork, but the way that you have personally put your life into your artwork and made your artwork become your life and your life become your artwork, all one in the same? How does mentorship help with that?
Well, I think mentor has shaped, my entire being, who I am, my character, the way I walk, the way I move, the way I talk, the way I interact with people. And Mr. Bradford, love him dearly, but it's a lineage of elder Black men. So my first mentor would have to be Robert Collier, who rescued me from juvenile corrections and got me into art school, and then basically held my hand as a Black teacher. Like, a lot of people can't say that they had a positive Black male teacher in school, and I had one who, he was out there, he hooped with us, he played football with us, he told us, what movies to go see, what games to watch on the weekend on TV. I mean, he was just that father figure. And like, for a lot of us Black males who were at the art school at that time, we came from what society was would call or designate a broken home. I came from a single parent home, but it wasn't nothing nefarious. It was just that, my pops passed away. He had a heart attack. So, I was pretty much raised by my mother, my grandmothers, and my sisters, because my brothers had all went into the service. So, Rob, as we affectionately call him, Robert Collier, he was my first mentor. Then when I joined the military, I would be mentored by a host of African-American elder statesmen, but one key cat is, Sergeant Lassiter, rest in peace, Aaron Lassiter, who was my section sergeant. Because I joined the military, man, trying to get away from art. Full disclosure, I didn't want to do art when I had left the art school. They had broken me as a visual artist. Like, they didn't pour anything into me, and they made me feel like my gift, wasn't anything unique, or I didn't have anything special. So I left a full ride scholarship to join the military, but I got hurt on a parachute jump. I was a paratrooper. I was in the 5th Special Forces Unit. I was a Green Beret. I got hurt on a parachute jump, and when I was rehabilitating, my homie gave me a sketch pad, and when my company commander came to do his wellness checks, he saw I could draw. He pulled my service record and saw that I had a year of art college, and they changed my job and made me an Army illustrator. The first time I was collected by a museum, I was in the military. I have work that belonged to the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Museum and the Don F. Pratt Memorial Museum in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. So I was a museum artist before I even got out the military. So
congratulations, man.
Yeah, Sergeant Lassiter, man. Sergeant Lassiter, he was from North Carolina. Hard charging brother. Southern wisdom, Southern game. Like, he gave me some game that is invaluable. He said, always move slow with patience, but always be early. Now let that soak in.
Say it again. Run it back one more time.
Always move slow, calculate it with patience, but always be early.
Sound like Lion Mind to me.
So when you think, man, like I said with that nugget, what the hell is he talking about? Like, be slow and be patient, but be early.
Yeah.
And all he was saying was be calculated. Think this through. Don't let your emotions get the best of you. Think it out and then execute and be sharp with your execution, because it's not about being on time, it's about being early. And so, you know, and then it just goes from there. You know, then I get out the military and I meet Mr. Bradford. It's like every time in my life, man, when I felt a struggle or if I felt a little unsure about myself, I would meet an older black man who would just lace me with some game and course correct me, man. And I love them for that.
Course correct.
I like
love
that.
I have because you were talking about art is a history and it's the present. And I see a lot of the folks behind you are from the good old days, I'll say, because these kids be trying to date us, you know, they be trying to make us feel real old and stuff.
Age shame.
You know, age shame. That's right. But do you have someone in particular present day that you would, or that you have highlighted because of the work that they're doing to uplift Black folks?
Oh, tons of people. My go-tos right now, and I haven't had the pleasure of meeting any one of these brothers, but Ta-Nehisi Coates and Ryan Coogler.
Okay.
Like, they on my bucket list if I got to meet them before I check up out of here, man. I mean, you talking about two once in a lifetime minds. Like the way them brothers think, the way they write. Like, I remember Ryan Coogler was in an interview that I saw on a podcast, and this lady tried to trip him up, and she said, you know, so you know, you're a director, and you know, if you ever watch how Coog gets down, Coog don't ever let nobody speed him up, and it always takes me back to what Sergeant Lassiter told me. Like, he's calculated in his answers. He's gonna pause, he's gonna think it through, and then he's gonna deliver a jewel for you. And he said, well, I'm a writer and a director. And he said that I don't go into a project unless I done already seen the movie in my head start to finish before I even get started.
Right.
Right. And she was stuck. She didn't even know where to go with her next question. You know, and you know, you know, looking at his work, looking at his body of work from Fruitvale Station through the Creed franchise, through the Black Panther, to now Sinners, which I believe is an instant classic. Like, you know, that's
Sinners? You watched it?
Sinners is I done seen it multiple times, man. That's an instant classic. So when you look at that, and then you look at the body of work that Ta-Nehisi Coates has been able to put together, it's like you talking about two brothers, man. Like, that's generational minds. And then I would have to throw in Ava DuVernay. I want to meet her. I want to meet you know, Issa Rae. I mean, there's just so many young people right now that are doing, you know, well, I call them young, you know, I'm the unk, but you know, it's so many of them that are doing stuff that I think kind of gets overshadowed with the way pop culture and how entertainment is covered today. That it's kind of tricky, but there are some people out there, man, that you know, are worthy of the shoulders that they standing on.
Okay,
that's what's up. Well, it looks like y'all looking at me, so I do have another question. Thanks for asking. Thanks for asking, guys. You were talking about being in art school and the teachers kind of basically chipping away at your spirit making you think that you were not capable. Can you kind of tell us when that started? Was it just in art school, or how has your educational kind of trajectory? What was that like?
Well, yeah. So my school was unique. When I was in the 12th grade, we only had 12 graduating seniors, and then only 10 of us were at the ceremony, because 2 had actually left and went on family trips. So there was only 10 kids who actually graduated my senior year, and I actually was class president. The Renaissance School of Arts in North Oakland. So because I had got proficient in my advanced art classes, I started being able to go take classes at the university when I was in the 11th grade. So from the 11th and 12th grade, I had already started taking classes at the California College of Arts and Crafts, and that was probably the reason I accepted their scholarship, because I was already familiar with the campus. I knew some of these teachers, and it was funny because like when I was the 11th grader and the 12th grader in those classes, I was like the darling. Like I'm like, ooh, this is that gifted kid from across the street.
Mm.
But when I got there as a freshman, attitudes changed. So and they were just like, Milt, you done all of this before. Like, it ain't, there's nothing in this class. You've already taken these, color theory classes. You've already taken this, composition. You already taken perspective. You already taken these courses. Just go home and erase the dates and turn them projects back in. So when I tried to lean on them and get them to push me or give me something different to do, so I could, I wanted to learn. Like
Mhm.
I have a thirst for learning. I love learning. I consider myself a lifelong learner. I'm always trying to learn something. So it just kind of like chipped away at me, and nobody kind of really understood it because, to be candidly honest, the average person during that time in Oakland, even my family, they didn't understand fine art or what art is.
Mhm.
Like, we talking about a culture where kids bring their pictures home that they did in school, and your parents look at it and say, "Oh, baby, this is cute, but do something that's gonna get you a real job."
Mm.
And they don't understand how that crushes the spirit of a creative young person. It's
Mm.
like, no, you take that picture, you put that shit in a frame, you put it on the refrigerator, you put it up somewhere where people can see it and praise it every day. Because the same praise that you give that child because that picture is hanging on that refrigerator, if they don't get it there, if they outside and they pick up a rock and they throw it through the window of a car or a building, and all of
Mhm.
their homies say, "Oh man, that was dope, that was cool," every day that kid is looking for another rock to break another window,
Wow.
opposed to bringing another picture home to put it on the refrigerator. And people don't trip off that. So, you know, I was starving for that, pat on the back, but my family didn't know how to give it to me because they don't understand. They didn't understand the art world, and they didn't understand art. Um, and like some of them still today, like they be shocked when they see like that somebody like Michael Jordan owns my work, or if they tune on to Fox News and see Donna Brazile in her living room and my painting is on her wall when she destroying Trump and his policies. My painting is hanging in her living room. Like
Mm.
people don't. It's hard for people to make them connections until they actually see it. Like I got homies that be texting me. They'll be looking at Roland Martin on the internet, and then they be like, "Damn, that looked like one of Milt's pieces." And so they'll text me, and Roland Martin got a big Kaepernick piece that I did for him on his set. Like it's like you can see it on his set. It's a Kaepernick piece. And so when people see that, then they start thinking about it differently. But it's like the average black person, from where I grew up, fine art wasn't on their radar. So they don't really understand what I do.
Mm.
So
I have a
if
question for you.
Both of y'all go.
So if you could give a few words to a young black artist who is struggling with their creativity and is ready to put the pencil down, put the medium down, what would you speak to them?
Oh, I tell them straight up. It's like you're in an industry where there's no surrender and no retreat. A creative has to create.
Mm,
Being a creative is not a choice. Being a creative is a calling.
I like that.
And when you know you're a creative, there's nothing that's going to stop you from creating. Like you could try to stop. You could go get a different kind of job. You could go do something. I joined the military, and
Can't
and
run
and
from it.
and I got. It's like The Godfather. I got out and they tried to, and they pulled me back in. You know what I'm saying? It's like you are not going to escape being a creative, and that's not just for a visual artist, man. That if you a musician, if you love the theater, if you are a writer, trust me, you could try to get away from it, but it's going to manifest itself in some kind of way. Now, the only
100%.
difference about that, the advice I would give to somebody that's young, I would tell them that regardless of what you're doing, you have to understand that you're doing something for an audience that probably ain't caught up to you yet.
I like
And
that.
the reason I say it that way is like when we criticize young people today, I think it's through a very narrow lens, because what we have allowed outside forces to do in the Black community is to bait us into this thought process that young people have to have it figured all out while they're young. And that's the furthest thing from the truth.
Absolutely.
You can go to Las Vegas right now, and you can see old white rock groups performing at the Bellagio, and they all taking Geritol and got the pins on. So why is it that every other culture outside of the Black culture can celebrate their arts well into their 70s, 80s, and 90s, but the African American community, we can't celebrate artists past the mid 20s? That's the bait and switch. No. You want your artists to mature. You want to be different. You want to think differently in your 30s than you did in your 20s. You want to think differently in your 40s than you did in your 30s. And you can have a career in doing that. And we have examples of it. All you got to do is look at, LL Cool J and the career he was able to put together.
Right.
Look at Will Smith in the career he's able. Will Smith was on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and you could just watch his lips move through every bit of the script. Like he didn't even know how to deliver dialogue, but he's on television, and we can look back on that and see it on tape today. But that didn't stop him from saving the world in Independence Day. So when you start to think about allowing our artists an opportunity to mature into their craft, young people have to understand you don't have to have it figured all out right now. If you got a raw gift or a raw skill, do it, and do it now. Don't wait to do it. Think about this. Do I tell people all the time? I mean, when I researched, when I was growing up and I had to do research, I had to use an encyclopedia. For all y'all young people out there, it's a book with a bunch of words and pictures and information. But I had to use an encyclopedia. Kids today got a computer in their pocket,
man,
and they using it for entertainment, not understanding that's a very powerful tool, and it's loaded with information. But it also is a vehicle for communication and promotion and marketing. So if you understand how video games work, I teach a workshop to young kids, and I explain to them there are two different mindsets for a creative. We know how popular video games are, right? So why in the Black community kids are consumed with getting the console and trying to get the high score, opposed to figuring out how is the programmer programming these video games to make people want to buy the console to try to get the high score. So either you're the programmer or you're the programmed. So when our young creatives start to realize that there's value in their creativity, don't just sit in your room trying to get the high score. Code that game, and you've created the highest score that you ever can create, which is ownership and intellectual property.
Facts. Facts.
Okay, so when we were talking at SCOE a few weeks ago, you had presented your new collection, and then you mentioned something about your wife also collaborating or her having her own. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the collection that I have up at SCOE right now it's a pretty ambitious project. There's 30 pieces that are in California. And all of them are done in the old-fashioned alphabet flashcard style. So they're called the ABCs of historical Black trauma. And what I'm doing is I'm deconstructing like what people.
Did you say historical? The ABCs of historical Black trauma?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just making sure.
So yeah, and the whole thing it's more of a deconstructing like what we think Black trauma looks like. Like what is the Black community been assaulted with? Like, what have we had to deal with? How do we cope with that? And what does it look like moving forward? And the whole scope of this project is to get people to understand that you have to be intentional about creating safe spaces for African American young men and women. That has to be intentional. That does not happen by accident. So me and my wife, this past February for Black History Month, we created a collection called the ABCs of Black History. And we debuted it at the Carnegie Visual Arts Center in Decatur, Alabama. And the response was almost overwhelming. So the Alabama Council on the Arts, they gave a grant to the Carnegie Center, and they field tripped every 3rd grade through 12th grade student, all the schools in the district, field tripped to the Carnegie Visual Arts Center to see our exhibition during Black History Month. We actually had to keep it up 2 extra weeks so certain schools could get in to see the exhibition. And it became this huge community dialogue and discussion. So we live in a very progressive part of the state of Alabama. We live in Decatur, Alabama, which is only 20 minutes outside of Huntsville, where they have the Aerospace and Science Center, Redstone Arsenal. So once you get past Birmingham, that's the Alabama you read about in the history books. But where we live at, it's really, more diverse and more progressive. So people were blown away over this collection. So when I was talking with Scoey about what we were going to do for the exhibition, I asked him, I showed them the collection that we did in February, me and my wife, and they fell in love with the concept because it's old school. I don't know, where you guys went to school at or elementary school, but I remember going to elementary school and the teachers would have like the ABCs on the wall, and they would have like how to do in cursive on the wall. So I wanted to kind of like revisit that, but in a more serious way. So, and like I said, because I'm inspired by film more so than I think art history, each one of the paintings basically have a character from a motion picture. And to go back to one of your original questions, the power of being able to have an image and then place text next to it changes the way you see that image. It forces the viewer to have to look at that image totally different. Like if I just put a picture on the wall, you can interpret that picture any way you want to interpret it. But if I put text next to that picture, I'm forcing you to have to think a little more deeply about what is the context of the words in relationship to the image. So I came up with this concept to deal with this history, but in a very elementary and inviting way. So let me ask you guys on the panel a question. This is one of the paintings from the show. I'm assuming all of you guys have heard of the Little Rock Nine, the 9 African American children who integrated Central High.
Correct.
Does anybody on the panel know what happened the year after they integrated Central High?
I don't. I'm not even live.
This is common. So this is not like a trap question or anything like that. The reason we don't get taught this information is intentional, because the year after those 9 African American children integrated Central High, the governor of Arkansas closed all public high schools for the entire year.
Wow.
So he could effectively stop integration, and not just stopping integration. This is why I love the title of y'all podcast so much, Black versus the Board of Education. This ties right into the title of y'all podcast, and I have a deep admiration. Like when Ayanna told me that this was like, the title, I was like, whoa, like, I can't wait to do this interview. Think about this for a second. That moment in history started segregation academies. And when I tell you the past is the present, with the dismantling of the Board of Education right now, the next thing coming out of that action is going to be the recreation of segregation academies. They're gonna take taxpayer money and allow white parents to enroll their children in all white schools, and black kids are gonna be left without those resources, and they're gonna be left with a public school system that is now fractured, giving them a worse education that they are already receiving. And if we don't get on our ball, then we are letting our young people down, and I ain't going for it.
You mean they're gonna publicly start doing what they already doing anyway?
Oh yeah, I mean we've been under assault since
Correct.
1964, but like I said, like you do have pockets, like you got some cats in the education world that have been fighting back on a lot of different levels,
Shout out
trying
to them.
to avoid this, but this is on a whole different sinister level. Like
Mhm.
this is on a whole different sinister level. We are back to the Jim Crow era, whether people want to believe it or not.
Well, I mean, I think that if people have been asleep all this time, they would, or if had they been awake, they would know that, right? Our schools here in California, in Elk Grove Unified School District, they are number one in the state for disproportionate discipline of Black children. That's why we stay so busy here. The facts of the matter is, when we continue to put our children in proximity to people who don't give a damn about them, 84% of the teaching corps are white women. And when we continue to subject them to that, and we continue to let these folks kind of lead the discussion or tell us what they think our kids need, rather than us filling that void as parents and or community members, actively telling them what we're not going to go for, we're going to continue to see this type of stuff. Now, my understanding is your collection debuted when when SCOE was given their report on the status of Black kids or students in Sacramento County. The fact of the matter is, we participated in that. We allowed them to come to our office, and we gave them a lot of information on the work we've been doing since 2018. And it always goes down to, people do not have the desire to change the way in which they're not servicing Black children.
Yeah, no.
They just don't have a desire.
No.
And our children get overshadowed by every other child. Our children have been at the bottom of every statistical category except discipline.
Can I squeeze something in here on that
Absolutely.
statement? But should we expect them to?
No.
Okay. So
yes and no. I'll say yes and no.
So this is my point. The county, the districts, and every educator has a responsibility to do their job and do what they were tasked to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a firm believer of, and this is not like letting anybody off the hook or trying to give anybody a pass for poor behavior or anything, but there's too much evidence, empirical data, that tells us as a Black community that when we do it ourselves, we do it at the highest level and we do it the best.
Facts.
Two quotes. Anybody listening to the podcast tonight, if you don't take anything away from what we discussed tonight, listen to these two quotes. James Baldwin said, "Someone who despises you can't teach you. You can't
100%.
learn from someone that hates you." Malcolm X said, "Only a fool will let the enemy educate their child."
Yes. And I'm a firm believer. That's why we took our kid out of public school and enrolled them in our homeschool, private homeschool. But for the parents who don't or can't or won't, what do you believe is stopping them from being able to believe that they actually have the tools to educate their own children?
Because the first thing is, there's a disrespect for the parent, student, and teacher relationship. We always talk about student-teacher relationships or parent-teacher relationship, but that's a three-pronged chair. It's the student, the parent, and the teacher. That is a cohesive relationship. And a lot of times, what we have to look at and what we have to deal with is the fact that education is not difficult once you remove certain obstacles. Like, I honestly believe that all children want to learn. Like, I teach in El Centro. I teach in Sacramento's juvenile correctional facility. Like, I teach art, and I teach an entrepreneurial art program to young men and women in El Centro. And these are young men and women who have made some poor choices. They're in juvenile hall, but
is that high school or what grade level?
I teach high school. I teach from 14 to 20-year-olds.
Okay.
So
So some of them are specifically still boys and girls.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
So, but they all have this hunger and desire to learn. Now, they have made some poor choices that have landed them where they are, but I was one of those children that was making poor choices. But I know I'm not a bad individual.
Mhm.
I know that I didn't know how to deal with the trauma that I was going through. So a lot of times what we're not recognizing with our young people is like we're talking too much. We need to stop and listen to the children. We need to stop and listen to these young people. They're going to tell us exactly what's going on. They're going to tell us what's wrong. We're going to know if there's some, turmoil or some discomfort in the household. We're going to know if it, because and you can look at most studies always point to the fact that we look at race and social justice issue sometimes through a lens that has nothing to do with poverty and health.
Hmm.
And a lot of times the problem is in the poverty, which is the framework for what's producing the majority of the dysfunction or the behavior issues in a child or a family. So those are the resources that we need to, really try to pour into the community. We need to deal with that because there's a reason why children, who are suffering from, poor diets and food deficiency. There's a reason why they do it. And like I said, there's a blueprint out there. Like when you look at what the Black Panthers were able to do with something as simple as feeding kids before they went to school, and how the US government deemed that and deemed their organization because of this one community program, public enemy number one during the time of the Vietnam War, should tell you everything you need to know. Anytime we come up with solutions, we come under attack.
Facts.
But the Black experience is about solving problems. And I don't know when we got away from solving our own problems. So if you think about Black Wall Street, to Rosewood, to Georgia, to the Panthers in the 60s, to the MOVE movement in the 70s, when we make a collective decision that we are going to do it ourselves and solve our own problems, we come under attack.
100%.
So the one thing we learn from history is that we don't learn from history.
Yeah. Well, then there it is. And unfortunately, we have run out of time. We thank you so much for spending this hour with us and taking us down the road of Black history through your lens. We ask that you consider joining us again in the near future so we can continue to discuss some of these things, because I'm going to go take a look at your exhibit before I have any more commentary, because I haven't seen it yet. And it sounds, by the sounds of it, it sounds like it was an intentional thing that was done to illustrate what's been, or maybe I might be wrong, to illustrate what's been going on in the county or what may be going on with our students, and how they're showing up to certain environments. Would that be accurate?
Very much so.
Oh,
Very
look
much
at
so.
me. Look at me.
And so the show is spread out across, like SCOE has 16 pieces, and then there are 14 pieces spread across the region. Like there are some at, there's a piece on each one of the Los Rios Community College campuses.
Okay.
There are two at Sierra Health Foundation. There are two at Improve Your Tomorrow. There's one at the Roberts Family Development Center. There's one in Oak Park at Underground Books. So to see all of the collection, you got to do like the little Underground Railroad tour. But a good place to start is seeing the 16 pieces that are at the SCOE district office.
And I want you to consider putting one up in here too in the future.
I would consider that.
Thank you. And can it be Bruce Leroy, please? Thank you. I still have a crush on him from when I was younger.
We gonna get you one of them glow pieces.
I appreciate you so much. So with that, we're gonna hit y'all with the peace sign. We'll see y'all next week right here on Black versus the Board of Education. Thank you, Milton 510 Bowens, for joining us. Thank you, Anaya, for the connect. And we will see y'all next week, which would be Anaya's birthday.
Yeah.
Happy early birthday, Anaya.
All right, peace out, y'all. Take care.
Bye.